everybody, welcome to Weekends and Waypoints. Today we're going to be going over how to install the RTR rear tire carrier for your 21 and up Ford Broncos. This will not be a bolt by bolt instruction, rather it will be a video to give you kind of an overview of what it's going to take to install the rear tire carrier from RTR. All right, let's get into it. Okay, here's a brief overview of what your parts are going to look like. Not too much. We have the hinges. This is for where the actual tire mounts to, along with this piece, because it is adjustable in and out. And then actually you can bolt this in different areas onto the actual tire carrier itself, which spans across the tailgate and into the hinges, which gives you a little bit better load bearing surface for that heavy spare tire that you're going to put onto it. You have an alignment bracket and your hardware. Probably gonna want a couple water bottles. I live in Las Vegas, so that's a necessity. If you live somewhere cooler, maybe some adult beverages. And if you did opt, you could do the Jerrycan for the right side of the tire carrier. It actually bolts onto those existing holes there. So we'll also be doing that. And that's what it looks like. So let's move on to step one of the install. Okay, back at the Bronco. Step one is going to be to remove your spare tire, and we're actually going to take apart the actual stock carrier itself. As you see, I already have a spacer here, but that is going to also come off. I do want to mention that RTR does include fantastic instructions. They include all the sizes that you'll need tool wise, and include pictures on how to do everything. This is available on their website underneath the tire carrier itself. So if you want to look through that before you buy, I highly suggest you do that. So first step, let's take off that spare tire. Okay, now that we got the spare tire removed and out of the way, you can see that we're gonna have to remove some bolts on this plastic spare tire carrier. For me, they're actually in these holes because I have a rough country spacer on there currently. But if you do not, then the bolts will obviously be visible from the outside. So let's take that off so we can get to the part where we take apart the camera and the rear taillight. Okay, we got that off, and now we can go ahead and take apart this stock spare tire carrier. I do suggest that you have a stool or a table, something present to have something to put this spare tire carrier on so it's not dangling by the wires out of the trunk. I just have a stool and a box. It is not very heavy. So now we're going to go ahead and pull apart the inside of here, these two bolts. There's two bolts on the front, and that allows us to take the camera out, and then we'll also dismantle this rear taillight assembly so that we can get it transferred over to the new stuff. So let's do that now. Okay, so we got the rear spare tire carrier taken apart, and we took out the spare taillight and the spare camera out of these housings. It's not hard. You just have to take out the few Torx bits on each piece and unplug the wires, and it comes right out. So we're going to leave that there for now and move on to actually putting the hinges on. I do have the panel off, so this panel on the inside comes off with 4 screws on this side and 2 10 mils on this side, and it gives you access to the actual hinges that mount into the body of the Bronco. So it does say to mark these and take them out. We do need to brace the door once again. Sorry for the wind, it's getting a little windy here, but we will do that again with this and probably another box, and I'll move on to that now. Okay, so we got the top hinge off. I do have some boxes bracing it. We're doing one hinge at a time, I want to point out. So you're going to do the top one, then the bottom one. And they do come out on this side also. I do want to point out though, at this time, that there is 2 different hinges, the replacement hinges that they give you. So that if you look, there's actually going to be one that slants backwards. So this would actually be the top one. If you look, these bolt holes here kind of slant backwards and or forward, sorry, like upward, like the top bolt is leaning forward. This one, if you look, the top bolt is kind of leaning backwards. And these hinges do that also. So you want to make sure that you're putting the right hinges on in the right location. Also, you can kind of see the comparison between the two hinges here. Much more stout design than what the factory gives you. Pretty impressive. So we're going to continue on. I'm going to put these hinges on. I'll finish putting the top one in. We'll do the bottom one, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so we got both hinges installed and adjusted. I'll show you what that looks like on this side. So both hinges are on. So when you're adjusting it, you can use these different sized washers, and you really just need to loosen and tighten these bolts and the bolts on the other side to get the door gaps where you want them to be. You also want to pay attention to where the actual latch is. Sorry for my dirty hands. I live in a desert and this thing gets kind of dirty. But so where this latch meets this slider, you actually want that to be near the bottom. Like you almost want it rubbing as you're closing the door on this. Especially when you don't have a spare tire on it, because once you put more weight on it, it's going to kind of level itself out a little bit, and it may find that it's going to be more equal to where it needs to be. So just something to pay attention to when you're actually aligning your door gaps. Also pay attention to that. So next step, we're going to go ahead and put the hoop on so that we can get going with the rest of the spare tire mount. So actually, one quick thing before we put the hoop on, make sure you install the supplied bolts before you put the hoop on. Just these top two, just the top two located at the top of the spare tire carrier, because you're actually going to use that to align the hoop on it. Also, if you have the little rubber wheel stop things on the back, just take those out and put these little grommets in that are supplied also. All right, so let's get this hoop on. Okay, so we have the actual hoop, spare tire carrier hoop installed. Basically it bolts in here, and then the existing fastener holes on the tailgate. Make sure that you do thread these wires through. You may find that it may be easier to do while it's still kind of off if you have somebody else to kind of hold it for you while you run the wires through, because it gets pretty tight up in here trying to run these wires through. So now that this is on, the next step is going to be putting the other pieces on, which include the actual tire mount and the spare taillight mount, along with the camera. So next step, we'll go ahead and put those on, and then we'll move on to actually aligning the spare tire. All right, so the actual mount is on, and it looks awesome. So with this, it actually goes in and out with this width of your tire, because different wheels and tires may be a little different, and you want it to sit nice and snug up against this. Same with your taillight, it will actually adjust up and down. One quick note, before you put this on, make sure that you thread the wire and the extension that they give you through this, or else you're gonna take it all apart and put it back through. So yeah, so next step is we're gonna put the tire on the spare tire carrier and see where we need to sit it, and then we'll snug everything down, and it should be just about done until we move on to the Jerrycan. Okay, so that's a final install. I think it looks pretty awesome. Minus the Jerrycan, which we'll go over next. This is to the point if you just had the tire carrier. I do want to point out a couple things that they did. So they did extend the camera mount, so you don't actually, if you have big offset wheels and big tires, you would see the bottom of the tire in your rear view camera. They eliminated that by bringing this out a little bit. What they also did is they went with 6 lugs instead of the original, I think it was 3 or 4. So another big improvement there also. Just to really make sure that this thing stays on. Definitely brings the tire nice and close to the rear end. Don't forget to zip tie this back here. I may add another one down here. But besides that, it's looking pretty good. Oh, I do want to point out that I off-centered mine. So there is options of where you can mount this. I mounted mine slightly off-center so that I can put the Jerrycan on there here shortly. Which I do also want to point out is that it makes the cutout look a little funky in the stock bumper because the rear tire is not aligned with it. I also have noticed that there is not many companies out yet that make a bumper without that notch. So basically, if you were to run this, almost any aftermarket bumper is going to have a center notch in it, and it's not going to be centered if you do the Jerrycan mount. If you do not, then you can just leave it centered, no big deal. The RTR bumper does not have a notch, which I think they thought of that. It actually just kicks out on the sides a little bit, so it doesn't look as goofy. So they're about the only ones right now that are going to be able to accommodate an off-center tire like that. Hopefully brands will realize this in the future and make some more straight cut high tuck bumpers. But anyways, we're going to move on. I'm going to build the Jerrycan mount here, and we'll go over that and get that mounted up and see how that looks. Okay, so here is the Jerrycan mount and the Molly, like the Molly accessory plate, whatever you want to call it. So you do need this to use the Jerrycan mount. So this actually has to get installed first. It's pretty easy. Just those hinge mount bolts is where it's going to bolt into using the new hardware. This does require assembly, so I'm going to do that here in a minute. We'll get that installed, and then we'll get that put on the Bronco, and we'll see how this all looks. Okay, so we got the Jerrycan mount. I must say, this thing is super cool. So if you look at actually so it's got a latch on this side. It also has a lock. Sorry, I'm trying to do this one-handed. It also has a lock, so you can lock with a key. But the action on this is very cool. It actually opens up both the top and bottom, so you can place a Jerrycan right inside. And it does have rubber blocks all around it, so it shouldn't rattle. Nice. That looks awesome. All right, so let's get it going, and we'll put this on so that we can get that put onto the Bronco. Okay, so I got the rear attachment panel on. This is super easy. Literally just take out the bolts that were in, replace it with the provided bolts, and you're good to go. The Jerrycan mount is actually going to be held in with little slot nuts. They're actually going to go inside of these slots here. So we'll go grab the Jerrycan and we'll start putting that on now, so you can see how that is. And there she is with a little bit of daylight to spare. The RTR Bronco rear tire carrier is complete. Overall, install wasn't bad. I think you could totally do it. I mean, I did it by myself. Just a couple hours, some basic tools. Overall, not a crazy install. I do want to mention that I said that you could use those little slot nuts in here. You can, but they also provide nylon nuts. So I opted for those instead as a little bit more permanent install for the Jerrycan. Overall, I think it looks great. Seems very sturdy. I was pretty hesitant on how far off center the rear tire was going to be with that little notch, but it actually looks pretty good. Also, this was my first ever YouTube video, so if you enjoyed this, please leave a like and subscribe. It'll definitely help me out. I do plan on doing more to this in the future, so if you would like to see more videos, definitely let me know. I would love to do some more videos with this guy. These new Broncos are pretty sweet. One last thing, I'm getting some wheels, right? They're gonna be have a little bit of white on them. You may have saw a sneak peek of them in the garage. I'm thinking about doing this Jerrycan in white also. What do you think? I think that would look pretty cool with the antimatter blue and white. Also, there's one last thing that I do want to, one last thing that I want to point out, is when you do open this tailgate, if you open it up all the way, this Jerrycan can hit this taillight. So RTR makes a limiting bracket that can help you prevent that. I'm getting some different taillights in the future that will completely eliminate that issue. So I do not have it, but I highly suggest if you are not going to go with a different taillight in the future, that you get that. Also, I don't think I mentioned, make sure you put in that bracket, that cover, hinge cover back on the inside. But this is Weekends and Waypoints. I want to thank you, and until the next one.